Series Collection Volume 1, Episodes 1 through 4. The Hot Gorilla Audio Tale Series, Number 1, Origin of Hot Gorilla. Written by Joseph Raines. Character creation by Keenan Rice. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a monotonous drone that mirrored the sterile, lifeless atmosphere of the laboratory. Dr. Marvin Glass adjusted his thick-rimmed glasses, beads of sweat rolling down his temple. He stood before a reinforced glass enclosure, clipboard in hand, as the subject inside stared back at him with an unnervingly intelligent gaze. This wasn't just any lab. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, shielded by layers of concrete, steel, and secrecy, this was Facility Theta, home to Project Apex. Officially, the lab didn't exist. It wasn't on any map, and even its funding was hidden under a web of dummy corporations. But for decades, its scientists had worked tirelessly to create the ultimate biological weapon. They had spliced animal DNA with precision, engineering creatures for speed, strength, and intelligence. Most experiments failed spectacularly, leaving behind grotesque monstrosities that lived, and often died, in agony. But the gorilla in this enclosure wasn't a failure. "You're going to be perfect," Dr. Glass muttered, his voice trembling with excitement. "The pinnacle of Project Apex, a weapon like no other." Inside the enclosure, the gorilla, once a regular silverback, was now an undeniable marvel of genetic engineering. His fur gleamed a midnight black, his muscles bulged like steel cables, and atop his head flopped two absurdly long pink bunny ears. The ears twitched slightly, a bizarre and unexpected result of splicing rabbit DNA into his genome. Dr. Glass cleared his throat, speaking as much to himself as to the gorilla. The rabbit DNA was supposed to enhance your jumping ability, long-distance leaps, low-impact landings, the perfect asset for combat scenarios. The ears, well, they were an unexpected side effect. The gorilla tilted his head, the pink ears twitching slightly. "You talking to me, Dr. Egghead?" Dr. Glass froze, his clipboard slipping from his hands, his heart hammered in his chest. "You're not supposed to be able to talk," he stammered, stumbling back a step. The gorilla scratched his chest nonchalantly, his golden eyes sparkling with amusement. "Well, surprise. Guess you overachieved, huh, Dr. Dingus?" He leaned forward, his massive hands gripping the edges of his enclosure. "So, when do I get out of here?" "No!" Dr. Glass exclaimed, pressing a button on the console to activate the sedative gas. "You're not ready for the outside world." "Yeah, well, the outside world isn't ready for me," the gorilla quipped, rolling his eyes. As the gas filled the chamber, he waved a hand in front of his face, unimpressed. "Cherry-scented? Cute. What's next, a bedtime story?" Dr. Glass clenched his fists, panic creeping into his voice. "You don't understand. You're more than just a gorilla now. You were designed for combat. Stronger, faster, smarter than anything on the planet. You're a weapon." The gorilla chuckled as his eyelids drooped. "A weapon, huh? Well, call me Hot Gorilla. Because one, I'm obviously a gorilla, and two, look at me." He wiggled his ears and smirked. "These ears? Sexy. This body? A masterpiece. Honestly, you nailed it, Dr. Dipshit. Hot Gorilla it is." He winked before slumping over, the sedatives finally taking effect. When Hot Gorilla woke up, he was strapped to a steel table, bright surgical lights glaring down at him. His ears twitched irritably, picking up every faint sound in the room. The low hum of the machines, the shuffling feet of nervous lab techs, and the faint murmurs of a conversation behind a nearby observation window. Facility Theta was more than a lab. It was a fortress. Built during the Cold War, it was originally intended to develop biological agents to rival enemy superweapons. But as technology advanced, its focus shifted. The world no longer wanted viruses. It wanted soldiers. Project Apex was the answer, an initiative to create bioengineered combatants that could dominate any battlefield. No emotion, no hesitation, just raw power and precision. "What's the deal, Dr. Dork?" Hot Gorilla growled, his voice echoing in the sterile room. "You want to poke me with needles, run some tests, or maybe take me out for a candlelit dinner? I'm into long walks through jungles and flexing my biceps for adoring fans, just FYI. Dr. Glass stepped into view, his expression grim. "This is for your own good." "Yeah, and banana-flavored ice cream is technically fruit. Let's cut the crap." Dr. Glass sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "You're special. You're not just an animal. You're a creation, the culmination of years of research. But if you're going to function in society, we need to make you less conspicuous." Hot Gorilla arched a furry brow. "Conspicuous? What's that supposed to mean?" "The ears," Dr. Glass said, pointing at the long pink bunny ears twitching atop Hot Gorilla's head. "They stand out." "Oh, these." Hot Gorilla gave the ears a playful wiggle. "Yeah, they're ridiculous, but you know what? They're part of my charm. Sexy ears on a sexy beast, don't be jealous." "They make you look like a science experiment gone wrong," Dr. Glass muttered. Hot Gorilla grinned. "I am a science experiment gone wrong, but I'm also the only guy in this room who could bench press a tank. So maybe show some respect, huh?" Before Dr. Glass could respond, the lab doors slid open with a hiss. Several men in black suits strode in, their polished shoes clicking against the floor. Their expressions were cold and calculating. One of them, a tall man with graying hair, stepped forward, his voice like gravel. "Dr. Glass, Project Apex is terminated. You're no longer in charge. The specimen will be neutralized and re-engineered for full military compliance." Dr. Glass froze. "You can't. He's not ready. We haven't run the psychological tests." The man sneered. "He's not a pet, Glass. He's a weapon. Start treating him like one." Hot Gorilla's ears twitched, catching every word. His golden eyes narrowed and his body tensed. "Neutralized? Re-engineered? Oh, hell no." Dr. Glass turned to him, panic in his eyes. "Don't do anything rash." But it was too late. With a feral roar, Hot Gorilla ripped the restraints from the table. The steel clamps snapped like dry twigs. He lunged forward, his massive fists slamming into the nearest agent. The man crumpled like a paper bag. "Time for a demonstration," Hot Gorilla growled. The room descended into chaos. Lab techs screamed and fled. The suited men scrambled to draw their weapons, but Hot Gorilla moved too fast. In seconds, 2 agents were unconscious, another was dangling from a ceiling pipe by his belt, and the rest had bolted for the exits. Dr. Glass crouched behind a console, peeking out as the dust settled. "Oh my God, he's unstoppable." Hot Gorilla turned to him, brushing dust off his fur. "Damn right I am. And by the way, Doc, thanks for the ears. They're not just sexy, they're practical." Dr. Glass stammered. You don't know what you're doing. The outside world isn't ready for me," Hot Gorilla interrupted. "Yeah, I've heard the spiel. Guess we'll find out." And with that, he smashed through the reinforced steel doors, leaving the lab and his would-be captors far behind. The city lights were blinding as Hot Gorilla strolled down the streets, earning stares, gasps, and the occasional shriek. A group of teenagers pointed and laughed, snapping photos. "Nice ears, dude," one of them called. Hot Gorilla grinned. "Thanks, kid. They're aerodynamic and attractive." He wasn't entirely sure what his next move would be. Freedom felt good, but it also came with complications. Where would he sleep? What would he eat? Could he find a tailor who could make shirts big enough for him? As he wandered, a woman's scream pierced the night. Instinct kicked in, and he bolted toward the sound, his powerful legs propelling him across the pavement in massive leaps. In a dark alley, he found a mugger holding a knife to a woman's throat. The mugger turned, his jaw dropping when he saw the 7-foot gorilla with bunny ears standing behind him. What the hell are you?" the mugger stammered. Hot Gorilla cracked his knuckles. "I'm the guy who's gonna make you regret all your life choices. Starting now." The mugger dropped the knife and bolted, leaving the woman trembling in the alley. She looked up at Hot Gorilla, her eyes wide with shock. Thank you," she whispered. "No problem, ma'am," Hot Gorilla said, tipping an imaginary hat. "Just doing my civic duty." And so began the legend of Hot Gorilla, the hero the city didn't know it needed, but definitely wouldn't forget. Hot Gorilla Audio Tale Series Number 2, The Sidekick, written by Joseph Raines, based on original characters from the imagination of Keenan Rice. The homeless camp wasn't much to look at, but to Hot Gorilla, it was paradise compared to the government lab he had escaped from 6 months ago. Here, under the overpass, no one cared that he was a 7-foot-tall, muscle-bound gorilla with floppy pink bunny ears. Sure, they stared at first, but after he snapped a dumpster in half during a heated argument with a raccoon, they mostly left him alone. Except Carl. Carl was the camp's self-proclaimed mayor, a wiry man with a scraggly beard and a never-ending supply of enthusiasm. He was the kind of guy who could make friends with a brick wall, and despite Hot Gorilla's best efforts to ignore him, Carl seemed determined to forge a partnership. "Listen, man," Carl said one evening as they huddled around a burn barrel. The firelight danced in his eyes, and he gestured wildly with a half-empty can of beer. "You've got superpowers. You're huge. You've got those, He paused, eyeing Hot Gorilla's ears. "Distinctive features." Hot Gorilla snorted, leaning back against the remains of a shopping cart he'd turned into a chair. "Distinctive features? Just say it, Carl. My ears are sexy. Everybody thinks so." Carl blinked. Sure, sexy. Whatever. My point is, you should be doing something with your abilities. You could be a hero." "A hero?" Hot Gorilla raised a brow, his golden eyes glinting in the firelight. "Carl, I live under a bridge. I eat cold-canned ravioli and chase pigeons for fun. I'm about as heroic as a drunk Santa Claus." Carl leaned closer, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. "That's exactly why you should do it. You're already at rock bottom. What have you got to lose?" "Dignity," Hot Gorilla said flatly. Carl ignored him, pacing back and forth as if delivering a TED Talk to an audience of one. "Think about it. You could stop muggers, rescue old ladies, beat up drug dealers. People would love you. And with me as your sidekick, we'd be unstoppable." Hot Gorilla raised a massive hand. "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Sidekick? Who said anything about a sidekick?" "Come on, every hero needs a sidekick," Carl said, grinning. "Batman has Robin. Iron Man has, that robot guy. I could be your guy." "You?" Hot Gorilla laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed under the overpass. "Carl, you can barely walk in a straight line, let alone fight crime." "I'm scrappy," Carl insisted, shadowboxing with exaggerated movements. "I've been in like 3 bar fights. One of them I almost won." "Yeah? What did you win? A nap on the floor?" Hot Gorilla smirked, but Carl's enthusiasm was infectious. He leaned forward, his floppy ears twitching as he considered the idea. "All right, let's say I do this hero thing. What do I even call myself?" "You've already got a great name," Carl said. "Hot Gorilla, it's perfect." "Damn right it is," Hot Gorilla said, flexing his biceps for emphasis. "But if I'm doing this, we're doing it my way. No tights, no cheesy catchphrases, and absolutely no hugging." Carl threw up his hands. "Deal." "So, where do we start?" Their first attempt at crime fighting was rocky. It started with Carl pointing out a guy stealing a bike from outside a liquor store. Hot Gorilla approached the thief, his massive frame casting a shadow over the sidewalk. "Hey, buddy," he said, crossing his arms. "What you doing?" The thief turned, his jaw dropping at the sight of the 7-foot gorilla with pink bunny ears. "What the fuck are—" Before he could finish, Hot Gorilla grabbed the bike and lifted it over his head like it weighed nothing. "This yours?" The thief nodded nervously, sweat dripping down his face. Yeah." "Wrong answer." Hot Gorilla tossed the bike into the air, letting it land with a crunch several feet away. "Stealing's bad, kid. Go get a job." The thief ran off without a word, and Carl clapped his hands in triumph. "See? That was amazing." Hot Gorilla rolled his eyes. "Yeah, real heroic. I scared a guy in flip-flops. Somebody call the Justice League." Over the next few days, they started to get the hang of it. Hot Gorilla developed a system. Carl would wander around town, eavesdropping for trouble while Hot Gorilla hung back to avoid causing a scene. When Carl spotted something, he'd signal Hot Gorilla by waving his arms like a lunatic. It wasn't glamorous work, breaking up bar fights, chasing down purse snatchers, stopping the occasional drunk driver. But Hot Gorilla had to admit it felt satisfying. There was something cathartic about tossing a would-be mugger into a dumpster or smashing a getaway car's engine block with his bare hands. Still, he kept his signature sarcasm intact. One night, they came across a group of teenagers spray-painting graffiti on a convenience store wall. Hot Gorilla towered over them, his bunny ears twitching as he looked down at their cans of paint. "Wow," he said, deadpan. "You guys are real rebels. Tagging a 7-Eleven. Watch out, society. These kids mean business." The teenagers scattered, dropping their paint cans as they ran. Carl picked one up and examined the label. "Huh, neon green. Bold choice." "You think?" Hot Gorilla said, rubbing his chin. "Maybe I should paint the camp. Really spruce up the place." Despite the occasional hiccup, their reputation began to grow. Word spread about the giant gorilla with the bunny ears and his scrappy human sidekick. People started leaving notes and small tokens of appreciation at the homeless camp. A loaf of bread here, a 6-pack of beer there. Carl, of course, loved the attention. "We're legends, man. People are starting to recognize us." "Yeah, because I'm the size of a truck and you scream like a banshee every time you see a crime," Hot Gorilla said, tossing a bag of chips Carl had brought back from their latest donation. "You're welcome," Carl said, munching on a stale donut. "By the way, we need to come up with a name for me." Hot Gorilla groaned. "Why? You're just Carl. Carl's fine." "No, no, no," Carl said, waving his hands. "If I'm going to be your sidekick, I need a superhero name, something badass, something that strikes fear into the hearts of villains." Hot Gorilla raised a brow. "Oh, this ought to be good. Hit me." Carl stood dramatically, striking a pose that looked more like a yoga stretch gone wrong. "Dark Avenger." Hot Gorilla blinked. "Dark Avenger? What are you, a Hot Topic cashier?" "Okay, fine," Carl said, frowning. "What about Shadow Knight?" "Shadow Knight? Jesus, Carl, I said scarier, not cringier." "Well, Mr. Big Ears," Carl shot back, crossing his arms, "why don't you come up with something better?" Hot Gorilla leaned forward, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "All right. You want a name that strikes fear into the hearts of villains? Something terrifying?" Carl nodded eagerly. "Yeah, let's hear it." Hot Gorilla's grin widened. "Steve." Carl stared at him. "Steve." "Yeah, Steve," Hot Gorilla said, his voice dripping with mock seriousness. "Think about it. You're a criminal. You hear someone's after you and his name's Steve. You'd shit yourself." Carl burst out laughing, doubling over as tears streamed down his face. "Steve? You're kidding, right?" "Dead serious," Hot Gorilla said, leaning back with a smug expression. "You want to strike fear? You go simple. Steve's the kind of name that gets results." Carl wiped his eyes, still chuckling. "All right, fine. Steve it is. But you owe me a cape." "No capes," Hot Gorilla said, wagging a finger. "You're clumsy enough without getting strangled by your own wardrobe." And thus the legend of Hot Gorilla and his terrifying sidekick Steve was born. a crime-fighting duo unlike any the city had ever seen. Hot Gorilla number 3, Nemesis, written by Joseph Raines, with original characters from the imagination of Keenan Rice. The city streets bustled with the usual evening chaos as Hot Gorilla sat perched on an old rooftop air conditioning unit, watching the world below. His pink bunny ears twitched occasionally, picking up snippets of conversation, honking cars, and the occasional shout from a street performer. Carl, his self-proclaimed sidekick and general nuisance, paced nervously beside him. "I'm telling you, something big is about to go down," Carl said, gesturing with a half-eaten burrito. "You've been saying that for the past week," Hot Gorilla replied, leaning back against a brick wall. "So far, the only big thing that's gone down is your blood sugar every time you skip a meal." Carl ignored the jab, his pacing intensifying. "I mean it this time. I've been hearing whispers, weird stuff, people disappearing, strange fights breaking out in alleys. It's all connected." "Uh-huh," Hot Gorilla said, rolling his golden eyes. "And I'm sure your buddy down at the taco truck told you this between bites of a quesadilla." "Actually," Carl said, pointing a finger triumphantly, "he did. And he knows things, all right? Street-level intel." Hot Gorilla groaned, rubbing his temples. "Fine, Carl. If you're so convinced, what's our next move, huh? Stakeout? Patrol? Or maybe we just follow your gut, which, for the record, has the accuracy of a drunk pigeon." Before Carl could retort, a loud explosion echoed from a few blocks away, followed by a chorus of panicked screams. Hot Gorilla's ears twitched. "Huh, looks like you got one right. Let's go." Without waiting for a reply, he leapt from the rooftop, landing effortlessly in the alley below. Carl scrambled to follow, muttering under his breath as he awkwardly climbed down a fire escape. They arrived at the scene moments later, a bank at the corner of 5th and Main. The scene at the bank was chaos. Smoke poured from the shattered glass doors, and alarms blared over the distant sound of sirens. Inside, a group of 5 masked robbers had taken control, barking orders at the terrified patrons. "Fill the bags, now!" one shouted, waving an automatic rifle. "Do as we say, and no one gets hurt," another yelled, his voice muffled by a cheap ski mask. Hot Gorilla crouched behind a car across the street, peeking through the smoke to assess the situation. Carl huddled beside him, clutching a broken broomstick like it was Excalibur. "All right, here's the plan," Carl whispered. "I'll sneak in and distract them, and you—" "Stop talking," Hot Gorilla interrupted, standing up. "Wait, what are you doing?" Carl hissed, grabbing at his arm. "Improvising," Hot Gorilla said with a smirk. He strode toward the bank, his massive frame immediately drawing the robbers' attention. One of them pointed a gun at him, his hands trembling. "What the hell is that?" "A freaking gorilla?" another muttered. Hot Gorilla raised his hands mockingly. "Relax, boys. I'm not here for your lunch money. I just wanted to ask if you've ever heard of cardio. Running in those ski masks must be brutal." "Stay back," the first robber shouted, firing a warning shot. The bullet ricocheted harmlessly off Hot Gorilla's chest. He dusted himself off, unfazed. "Cute. My turn." He lunged forward, grabbing the nearest robber and tossing him into a stack of overturned desks. The second charged at him with a crowbar, but Hot Gorilla caught it mid-swing, bending it in half with a grin. "You guys are adorable," he said, tossing the twisted metal aside. "But maybe stick to shoplifting. This whole criminal mastermind thing isn't your vibe." 2 of the remaining robbers bolted for the back exit, their courage evaporating. But one stayed behind, a tall, muscular man who moved with an eerie fluidity. "You've had your fun," the man growled, stepping forward. Hot Gorilla raised a brow. "Oh, great, the ringleader. Let me guess, you're gonna monologue now?" The man didn't reply. Instead, he crouched low, his fingers curling like claws. Then he lunged, faster than any human should be able to move. Hot Gorilla barely had time to react before the man's fist slammed into his chest, sending him skidding backward. For a moment, Hot Gorilla stared at him in disbelief. "Okay," he muttered, rubbing his ribs. "That actually hurt. What are you, a professional wrestler?" The man smirked, revealing unnervingly sharp teeth. "Something like that." Hot Gorilla charged, throwing a punch that would have leveled a truck. But the man ducked under it with inhuman speed, delivering a sharp kick to Hot Gorilla's knee. "You've got some moves," Hot Gorilla admitted, grimacing as he regained his footing. "But I've got the size advantage." He swung again, this time connecting with the man's shoulder. The force sent him crashing into a nearby column, cracking the concrete. "Stay down," Hot Gorilla said, cracking his knuckles. But the man didn't stay down. He got to his feet, shaking off the impact like it was nothing. His movements were unnervingly animalistic now, low to the ground, quick and predatory. "All right," Hot Gorilla said, his ears twitching. "This is officially weird." Before the fight could escalate, the man leapt backward, grabbing one of the abandoned cash bags. He shot Hot Gorilla a final toothy grin before darting out the back exit with impossible speed. "Damn it!" Hot Gorilla growled, starting to give chase. Maybe let him go?" Carl's voice piped up. Hot Gorilla turned to see Carl standing awkwardly in the middle of the chaos, holding a fire extinguisher like a shield. "Seriously?" Hot Gorilla asked. "What?" Carl said defensively. "I was gonna hit him with it if he came at me." Hot Gorilla sighed, his shoulders slumping. "Let's just get out of here before the cops show up." Later that night, back at their makeshift headquarters, a rooftop with an old tarp and a couple of lawn chairs, Hot Gorilla sat brooding while Carl recapped the day's events with far more enthusiasm than they warranted. "That was insane," Carl said, pacing excitedly. "You were all like, smash, and that guy was all like, zoom, and then, bam, right into the column." "Yeah, thanks for the play-by-play," Hot Gorilla muttered, rubbing his temples. "In case you missed it, Carl, I didn't win." "You didn't lose either," Carl said, shrugging. "That guy ran off like a scared little whatever he was." Hot Gorilla's ears twitched at the memory. The man's movements had been unnatural, too fast, too precise. And those teeth. "He wasn't normal," Hot Gorilla said, his tone unusually serious. "No kidding," Carl said. "Dude was like a jungle cat on steroids." Hot Gorilla nodded slowly. "Which means this isn't over. Whoever that guy was, he's working for someone. And if they've got more like him, we're in for a hell of a fight." Carl sat down beside him, frowning. "So, what do we do now?" Hot Gorilla stared out at the city, his golden eyes glinting in the moonlight. "We do what we always do. We smash bad guys. And when we find whoever's behind this, they're gonna wish they stayed in their little hidey hole." The night air was cool and quiet as Hot Gorilla and Carl strolled down an empty street. Carl swung a flashlight he didn't need, using it more like a baton, while Hot Gorilla walked with his hands behind his head, his pink bunny ears twitching as he listened for trouble. "You know," Carl said, breaking the silence, "we've been at this for weeks now, and I gotta say, I think we're getting pretty good at this superhero thing." Hot Gorilla snorted. "Speak for yourself. You still scream like a toddler every time someone pulls a gun." "That's called strategy," Carl shot back, puffing out his chest. "It distracts them, throws them off their game." "Right," Hot Gorilla said dryly. "You're a tactical genius." Before Carl could respond, the sound of breaking glass shattered the quiet. Hot Gorilla's ears perked up, and he turned toward the source. Across the street, a jewelry store's front window was smashed, its alarm blaring. "Showtime," Hot Gorilla said, cracking his knuckles. They approached cautiously, peering inside. The store was in shambles, glass cases smashed, and shelves overturned. 3 masked robbers were busy stuffing diamonds and gold into duffel bags. But it was the figure standing near the back that caught Hot Gorilla's attention. The tall, muscular man from the bank stood with his arms crossed, his sharp features illuminated by the dim emergency lights. He moved with a predator's calmness, exuding an air of control as the other robbers worked. "Well, well, well," Hot Gorilla muttered. "If it isn't Mr. Cat Fancy." "That's the guy from the bank," Carl hissed, gripping his flashlight nervously. "What do we do?" "We smash," Hot Gorilla said, stepping through the broken window. "Hey, kitty cat," he called out. "Didn't think I'd see you again so soon." The man turned, his piercing yellow eyes narrowing. "You should have stayed out of this," he growled. "You don't know what you're messing with." "Oh, I'm pretty sure I do," Hot Gorilla said, flexing his biceps. "You steal stuff. I punch you. Repeat as necessary. Simple." The man smirked, his body tensing as he dropped into a low stance. "You've made a mistake coming here tonight." Hot Gorilla grinned. "I like a guy with confidence. Let's see if you can back it up." The two collided with a thunderous crash, sending shards of glass flying. The robbers scattered, ducking for cover as Hot Gorilla and the man traded blows. The cat-like robber was faster, darting around Hot Gorilla with inhuman agility and precision, his movements eerily reminiscent of a stalking panther. Hot Gorilla swung a fist, but the man ducked under it with ease, landing a powerful kick to Hot Gorilla's ribs. "Not bad," Hot Gorilla admitted, grimacing as he steadied himself. "But you're gonna have to hit harder than that if you want to take me down." The man moved again, circling Hot Gorilla with lightning speed, striking him from angles that were hard to predict. Each blow was calculated and precise, designed to keep Hot Gorilla off balance. "All right," Hot Gorilla said, his ears twitching. "This is officially annoying." He lunged forward, catching the man mid-dodge and slamming him into a display case. The impact shattered the glass, and the man groaned as he hit the floor. "Guess you're not as untouchable as you think," Hot Gorilla said, towering over him. But the man wasn't done. He sprang back to his feet with surprising speed, landing a solid kick to Hot Gorilla's chest that sent him skidding backward. "You've got some moves," Hot Gorilla said, rubbing his chest. "But I've got these sexy-ass ears, so it seems pretty clear I'm gonna win." The fight dragged on, with Hot Gorilla using his brute strength to overpower the man's speed. Finally, after a particularly intense exchange of blows, Hot Gorilla managed to grab him mid-dash, slamming him into the floor with enough force to crack the tile. The fight ended with the man pinned beneath Hot Gorilla's massive hand, gasping for air. His mask had fallen off, revealing his sharp features and predatory eyes. "All right, Jungle Jim," Hot Gorilla said. "You're done, but before I hand you over to the cops, you're gonna tell me who you're working for." The man smirked weakly. "You'll find out soon enough." Hot Gorilla frowned. "Cryptic and useless. Great. Guess I'll just look through your stuff." Reaching into the man's pocket, he pulled out a battered cell phone. He held it up to Carl, who was cautiously peeking through the broken window. "Hey, Steve, think you can hack this?" Carl rolled his eyes. "It's Carl. And no, I can't hack a phone, but I can hit redial." "Same thing," Hot Gorilla said, tossing him the phone. "Make yourself useful." Carl pressed a button, holding the phone to his ear. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Report," the voice demanded, cold, clinical, and unmistakably familiar to Hot Gorilla. "Dr. Glass," Hot Gorilla said, grabbing the phone from Carl. His golden eyes glinted with anger. "Long time no see." There was a pause, then the voice on the other end hardened. "You." "Me," Hot Gorilla said, leaning casually against a broken display case. "You've been busy, Doc. Animal-themed thugs? Cute. Let me guess. You got fired from your cushy lab job and decided to play Dr. Frankenstein?" "You ruined everything," Dr. Glass snapped, his composure cracking. "Years of research gone, my reputation destroyed. Do you have any idea what I've lost because of you?" "Let me guess," Hot Gorilla said. "A fancy grant, a parking spot with your name on it, and maybe a 401k? Boo-hoo." "You think this is a joke?" Dr. Glass hissed. "I was going to change the world. Now I'll destroy it. And you, starting with this city. Wow, Hot Gorilla said, raising an eyebrow. That's original. Let me guess. Next, you're going to monologue about how I'll regret crossing you. You will regret it, Dr. Glass snarled. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Sure, Doc. You've got a gang of knockoff Power Rangers and a chip on your shoulder. Real terrifying. This isn't over, Dr. Glass said, his voice icy. I'm going to tear down everything you care about. Mark my words, Gorilla. Before Hot Gorilla could reply, the line went dead. He stared at the phone for a moment, then handed it back to Carl. Well, Carl said, scratching his beard. That sounded ominous. Hot Gorilla smirked, his bunny ears twitching. Looks like I've got a nemesis. Carl frowned. Wait, does that make me the sidekick of a guy with a nemesis? Is there, like, a sidekick protocol for this? Relax, Steve, Hot Gorilla said, patting him on the head. You're doing fine. Carl swatted his hand away. It's Carl. Whatever you say, Steve, Hot Gorilla said with a grin, walking off into the night. Let's go. We've got a lot of smashing to do. And with that, the stage was set. Hot Gorilla and his sarcastic wit had found their match in Dr. Glass, a nemesis who wouldn't rest until he brought the city to its knees. Hot Gorilla, Number 4, Sanctuary. Written by Joseph Raines, with original characters from the imagination of Keenan Rice. The camp under the overpass was quieter than usual. Hot Gorilla sat on an overturned barrel, peeling a bruised banana with all the enthusiasm of someone doing their taxes. Carl paced nearby, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his patched-up jacket, his brow furrowed in thought. We can't stay here, Carl said suddenly, breaking the silence. No kidding, Hot Gorilla replied, taking a bite of his banana. I've been saying that for weeks. Between the raccoons stealing our food and those hipsters who keep trying to discover us, it's a miracle we've lasted this long. Carl stopped pacing and turned to face him. I'm serious. With Dr. Glass out there and his animal gang running around, this place isn't safe for the others. We're putting everyone here in danger just by being around. Hot Gorilla sighed, tossing the banana peel into a nearby shopping cart. You're not wrong, but where exactly are we supposed to go? It's not like we can put up a superhero hideout wanted ad on Craigslist. I've been thinking about that, Carl said, rubbing his scruffy beard. There's this abandoned industrial district a few miles from here. I scoped it out last week. Most of the buildings are falling apart, but there's one that's still in decent shape. A banana pudding factory. Hot Gorilla's ears twitched. A banana pudding factory? Yeah, Carl said, nodding eagerly. It's been shut down for years. Big space, no one around, and... You had me at banana, Hot Gorilla interrupted, standing up. Let's go. Carl blinked. Wait, just like that? You don't want to hear the rest of my pitch? Carl, you could have just said the word banana, and I'd already be halfway there, Hot Gorilla said, stretching his massive arms. Now move your legs, young Steve. We've got a new home to find. Carl muttered something under his breath about being called Steve, but followed as Hot Gorilla started toward the industrial district. The industrial district was a wasteland of rusted machinery and crumbling concrete. The skeletal remains of old factories and warehouses loomed like ghosts, their broken windows and faded signs bearing silent testimony to a forgotten era. Carl led the way, flashlight in hand, while Hot Gorilla followed behind, his massive frame casting an intimidating shadow. This place has a real post-apocalyptic vibe, Carl said, his voice echoing off the empty buildings, like a scene out of Mad Max. I like it, Hot Gorilla said, stepping over a rusted pipe. Gives it character. They stopped in front of a large building with a faded sign that read, Sweet Spoon Banana Pudding Company. The letters were chipped and weathered, and the sign itself hung at an awkward angle, as if one good gust of wind could knock it down. The windows were boarded up, and the front door hung crooked on its hinges. This is it, Carl said, gesturing dramatically. Our new home base. Hot Gorilla stepped inside, ducking slightly to fit through the doorway. The interior was dusty and cluttered with old equipment, mixing vats, conveyor belts, and stacks of rusted tin cans. The faint smell of spoiled bananas lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of mildew. "Perfect," Hot Gorilla said, clapping his hands together. "It's like it was made for me." "Really?" Carl asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you'd complain about the smell or the fact that it's falling apart." "Carl," Hot Gorilla said, turning to him with a serious expression. "It's a banana pudding factory. This place is sacred." Carl rolled his eyes. "All right, fine. But what do we call it? Every superhero hideout needs a cool name." Hot Gorilla scratched his chin, his golden eyes scanning the room. Then he smirked. "The Banana Bunker." Carl groaned. "That's not even remotely intimidating." "It's perfect," Hot Gorilla said, grinning. "Banana pudding is a comfort food, Carl. Comforting people is what heroes do." Carl stared at him. "You realize no one will take us seriously, right?" "Correction," Hot Gorilla said, pointing at himself. "No one takes you seriously. I, on the other hand, am a force of nature wrapped up in this sexy-ass beast body." Over the next few days, they turned the Banana Bunker into a functional hideout. Carl rigged up a generator using scrap parts, while Hot Gorilla repurposed old conveyor belts into a makeshift gym. They even found a stash of unopened banana pudding cans in the back room, much to Hot Gorilla's delight. "I'm going to need you to leave these alone," Hot Gorilla said one day, holding up a can of banana pudding like it was a holy relic. "These are for emergencies only." Carl raised an eyebrow. "What kind of emergency requires pudding?" Hot Gorilla frowned. "I don't know. Emotional distress, a sugar crash, the apocalypse, Tuesdays. Take your pick." Carl shook his head and went back to sorting through a pile of broken chairs they'd scavenged. "You're hopeless." But the peace didn't last long. One evening, as they were settling in for the night, Carl burst into the room holding his phone, his face pale and his eyes wide. "You're not gonna believe this," he said, his voice shaking with a mix of excitement and anger. Hot Gorilla looked up from his makeshift hammock. "If it's about that 2-for-1 pizza deal, I already know. I signed us up." "No, it's worse," Carl said, shoving the phone into Hot Gorilla's hand. The screen displayed an article about a local cosmetics company, LuxGlow, which had recently been exposed for unethical animal testing. The story included pictures of chimps in tiny cages, their eyes wide with fear and their fur matted with grime. Hot Gorilla's ears flattened and his jaw tightened as he scrolled through the article. "These bastards," he muttered. "I know," Carl said. "They're using chimps for testing. Can you believe that? It's disgusting." Hot Gorilla tossed the phone onto the table, his fists clenched. "We're shutting it down." Carl blinked. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," Hot Gorilla said, his voice low and dangerous. "We're breaking in, freeing those chimps, and making sure LuxGlow never does this again." "Okay, but how?" Carl asked. "This isn't like stopping a bank robbery. This is a high-security lab with cameras, guards, and who knows what else." Hot Gorilla grinned, his golden eyes glinting. "We'll go full Mission Impossible on their asses." Carl stared at him. "You've never even seen Mission Impossible, have you?" "Nope," Hot Gorilla admitted. "But I'm sure it involves smashing things." Carl sighed. "All right, fine. But if we're doing this, we need a plan, a real one." "Then start planning, Steve," Hot Gorilla said, grabbing a banana pudding can. "We've got chimps to save." Carl shook his head but couldn't suppress a grin. "You're impossible." "And you're Steve," Hot Gorilla shot back, grinning as he peeled the lid off the pudding. "Now get to work." The LuxGlow Cosmetics Lab sat at the edge of the city in a sleek, glass-paneled building that seemed more suited to a tech startup than a center for unethical experiments. It looked harmless enough, but Hot Gorilla could feel the tension in his muscles as he crouched behind a bush across the street, staring at the brightly lit structure. Beside him, Carl was flipping through a notebook, the pages covered in scribbles and crude diagrams. He held it up, showing Hot Gorilla a stick-figure drawing of the lab. "All right, here's the plan," Carl said, tapping the page for emphasis. "Step 1, get inside. Step 2, find and save the chimps. Step 3, contact the animal rights group I met online to get them out of here safely." Hot Gorilla stared at him, his golden eyes blinking slowly. "It took you 2 days to come up with that?" Carl glared at him. "It's not as simple as it sounds. I had to convince these people that we're not crazy, and that you're not some escaped zoo attraction." Hot Gorilla smirked. "So basically, you spent 2 days emailing and asking nicely." "They weren't exactly jumping to help us at first," Carl said defensively. "Do you know how hard it is to explain to a group of professional animal rescuers that you've got a 7-foot gorilla with bunny ears who wants to save chimps from a cosmetics lab?" "Sounds like a them problem," Hot Gorilla said with a shrug. "Still, you forgot the most important step." Carl frowned, flipping through his notes. "What step?" "Step 4. Go back to the banana bunker and eat pudding," Hot Gorilla said, a grin spreading across his face. Carl groaned, rubbing his temples. "Of course. How could I have forgotten the pudding step?" "See? It's a good thing I'm here to keep you focused," Hot Gorilla said, leaning back against the bush. "Now, let's hear how you're actually getting us inside." Carl pulled out a smaller notebook filled with more details and a very poorly drawn map of the lab. "Step 1 is going to require some finesse," he began, flipping to the right page. Hot Gorilla snorted. "Finesse? With you? This should be good." "All right, let's get to work," Carl said, rolling his eyes. "The front entrance is out of the question. Too many cameras. We'll sneak in through the loading dock. I've scoped it out, and there's a keypad entry, but—" "Let me guess," Hot Gorilla interrupted. "You don't know the code." Carl hesitated. "Not exactly, but I have a plan for that too." Hot Gorilla raised an eyebrow. "If you say, distract the guard, I'm leaving you here." No, it's better than that," Carl said, pulling a small plastic bag from his jacket pocket. "I found these at the dollar store." Hot Gorilla peered at the bag, which was filled with colorful fireworks. "You bought sparklers?" "They're not just sparklers," Carl said defensively. "They're a distraction device." "You're going to distract highly trained guards with children's party favors," Hot Gorilla said flatly. "Look, do you have a better idea?" Carl shot back. Hot Gorilla thought for a moment. "Not really. Let's do it." The loading dock was quiet, with only a single guard standing by the door. Carl crouched behind a dumpster, fumbling with a lighter as he tried to ignite one of the fireworks. "Any day now, Carl," Hot Gorilla muttered, his pink ears twitching impatiently. "I'm working on it," Carl whispered back. After several failed attempts, the sparkler finally lit, crackling brightly in the darkness. Carl hurled it over the dumpster with a triumphant grin. The firework landed a few feet from the guard and immediately began spinning in a wild circle, shooting colorful sparks in every direction. The guard jumped, his hand flying to his holster as he stared at the unexpected light show. "What the hell?" the guard muttered, cautiously approaching the spinning firework. "That's our cue," Hot Gorilla said, moving silently toward the door. Carl followed close behind, nervously clutching his bag of fireworks. "I can't believe that actually worked." "Don't get cocky, Steve," Hot Gorilla whispered, punching the door's keypad with enough force to break it. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. "Subtle," Carl muttered as they slipped inside. The interior of the lab was cold and sterile, with white walls and fluorescent lights that hummed faintly. Hot Gorilla sniffed the air, his nose wrinkling at the faint chemical smell that lingered. "This place gives me the creeps," Carl whispered, his eyes darting around. "Focus," Hot Gorilla said, his golden eyes scanning the hallway. "Where do you think they're keeping the chimps?" Carl pulled out a map he'd printed from the internet. "Animal testing labs are usually in the basement. If we can find the stairs—" "Found them," Hot Gorilla interrupted. pointing to a nearby sign that read, "Restricted Area, Authorized Personnel Only." They descended the stairs cautiously, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick concrete walls. At the bottom, they found themselves in a dimly lit corridor lined with heavy steel doors. "This is it," Carl whispered, his voice barely audible. Hot Gorilla approached the nearest door, peering through the small window. Inside, a group of chimps sat in cramped cages, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. One of them let out a low, mournful whimper as it clutched the bars. Hot Gorilla's ears flattened, and his fists clenched. "Bastards," he muttered. Carl placed a hand on his arm. "We'll get them out, but we have to do this smart. No smashing, unless absolutely necessary." Hot Gorilla nodded, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "All right, Steve, what's the plan?" Carl held up a lockpick set. "I've been practicing." "You've been practicing lockpicking?" Hot Gorilla asked, raising an eyebrow. Carl grinned. "You'd be surprised what you can learn on YouTube." It took Carl longer than he wanted to admit, but eventually the locks on the cages clicked open one by one. The chimps hesitated at first, their eyes darting nervously between Carl and Hot Gorilla. "Come on, guys," Hot Gorilla said gently, crouching down to their level. "We're getting you out of here." One of the chimps, a small female with a patch of missing fur, stepped forward cautiously. She sniffed the air, then reached out a hand to touch Hot Gorilla's arm. "There you go," he said softly. "We're on your side." The rest of the chimps followed her lead, climbing out of their cages and gathering around Hot Gorilla and Carl. "What now?" Carl asked, glancing nervously down the hallway. "Now we get them to safety," Hot Gorilla said. As they led the chimps out of the building, Carl tapped his phone, sending a prearranged signal. A few minutes later, the hum of an engine echoed through the alley. A box truck emblazoned with the logo of the Friends of Primates Coalition pulled up beside the loading dock. The driver, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and a warm smile, jumped out. "You must be Carl and—" "Oh, wow." Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of Hot Gorilla. "You're a lot bigger than I expected," she said. "Comes with the territory," Hot Gorilla replied. "You're with the rescue group?" "Yep," she said, holding out her hand. "Name's Laura. We've got contacts at Save the Chimps in Florida. They're expecting these guys." "Perfect," Carl said, helping guide the chimps toward the truck. "They've been through enough. It's about time they had a happy ending." Laura nodded, her expression serious. "Don't worry, we'll take good care of them. Save the Chimps is the best sanctuary in the country. These chimps are about to live the rest of their lives in peace." Hot Gorilla watched as the chimps climbed into the truck, their movements cautious but hopeful. The smallest one paused at the door, turning back to look at him. "Go on," he said softly. "You're free now." The chimp gave a small hoot before disappearing into the truck. Hot Gorilla, his pink ears twitching as he kept a watchful eye on the chimps, asked, "What's the deal with this sanctuary? It's not some PR stunt, is it?" Laura gave him a small smile. "Not even close. Save the Chimps is one of the best in the world. They've got sprawling outdoor habitats where these guys can finally live like chimps are meant to. Climbing, foraging, socializing. No more cages, no more experiments." Hot Gorilla nodded slowly, his gaze softening as he watched the smallest chimp peek out from behind another, its wide eyes locked on him. "Good. They deserve it." Carl, standing nearby with his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, grinned. "See? I told you it was worth reaching out to them." Hot Gorilla smirked. Yeah, you're a real hero, Steve. Don't let it go to your head." Laura chuckled. "You two are quite the team. It's a little unconventional, but effective." "We aim to please," Carl said, puffing up slightly. Hot Gorilla turned to Laura, his expression serious. "What about Luxglow? You know they're just going to replace these chimps with more unless someone shuts them down for good." "We're working on it," Laura said. "This rescue is just the beginning. We've got lawyers and investigators building a case to take them down legally. It'll take time, but we'll make sure they pay for what they've done." Hot Gorilla grunted in approval. "Good. If you need someone to break anything else, you know where to find me." Laura laughed. "I'll keep that in mind." As the vehicle pulled away, Laura waved from the driver's seat. "You guys did a good thing tonight. Thank you." Hot Gorilla's ears twitched and he crossed his arms. "Yeah, well, don't spread it around. I've got a reputation to maintain." Carl patted him on the back. "We did good, buddy. Real superhero stuff." Hot Gorilla smirked. "Don't get used to running away at the end of a mission, though. I still hate running." As the truck pulled away, carrying the chimps toward their new lives, Carl and Hot Gorilla stood in the empty alley, the city lights casting long shadows around them. "So," Carl said, breaking the silence, "we saved the chimps. What now?" "Now we head back to the banana bunker," Hot Gorilla said, stretching his massive arms. "I've got a date with some pudding." Carl laughed, shaking his head. "You and that pudding. One of these days you're going to turn into a banana." "Better than turning into you," Hot Gorilla shot back with a grin. As they walked through the quiet streets, Carl glanced over at him, his tone turning more thoughtful. "Hey, do you think we made a difference? I mean, really made a difference?" Hot Gorilla's ears twitched as he considered the question. "We saved lives. That's more than most people do in a lifetime. So yeah, I think we made a difference." Carl nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, I guess we did. Of course, we also caused a bunch of property damage, broke at least 50 laws, and probably pissed off a billion-dollar company," Hot Gorilla added. "So, balance." Carl sighed. "Can't you ever just leave it on a high note?" "Nope," Hot Gorilla said, grinning as he slapped Carl on the back. "Come on, Steve. Let's go home." As they disappeared into the night, a sense of quiet victory hung in the air. The chimps were safe, Luxglow was exposed, and the banana bunker awaited, stocked with enough pudding to last until their next adventure.